So there we go. So these recordings will cover whatever we say in class as well as whatever going on the screen. So the way we are going to explore all of these resources and techniques is using a hypothetical. I mean, this is law school after all, right? And then we will take a look at the various types, segments and types of resources using that question. So our hypothetical for the semester. I am your new client. Always a good thing to have a client. I walk in your door. I live and work in New York. I was born with a heart defect and wanted to go to a cardiologist for preventative care. So I checked with my health insurance to make sure that I could get coverage. My health insurance I get through my employer. And that insurance basically denied approval for coverage for my visit to the cardiologist. So I didn't go because, as you may or may not know, specialist visits are really expensive. So I didn't go. And then about 6 months after that, so not so long after that, I had a heart attack. The symptoms for which may or may not have been detected had I been able to go to a cardiologist. So I want to sue my health plan, which is an HMO, for denying this coverage. Okay, so you have a client in your office. As I said, always a good thing. What's the first thing you're going to do? You look like you're always going to answer there, Sean.
First thing I'm going to do when the client meets my office and it's not my retainer and hired is probably research using Westlaw, Lexis, whatever, and kind of look into like similar cases, similar types of things to see like what's going on, how much money I can win, stuff along those lines, and just legal requirements behind it.
So what would you research? Alex, you want to help Sean out?
I would look for protections for people with pre-existing conditions under the Affordable Health Care Act.
Okay. Anybody else?
I was going to ask for the policy, any information like on the HMO, who the employer is, first.
Okay. So what questions do you all want to? So Alex, you said you want to research.
Well, Alex, he's a pre-existing condition, or client's a pre-existing condition, right? The heart defect.
It is. Yeah.
And that was a big feature of the Affordable Health Care Act about deny coverage for pre-existing conditions.
True. Anybody else?
Which is the Google search of like insurer liability for denial of coverage.
So what? Stan.
You want the client's actual insurance policy documentation.
So what we are actually doing here, but no one has named formally, and that's okay because it doesn't have to be formal, is we are doing issue spotting, right? Remember from first year, I'm guessing, legal writing. Now, this is one set of questions that you can ask yourself. I'm sure you had others in your legal writing class and any other classes that you might have. I particularly like this only because it's easy for me to remember who, what, where, when, why, how, and I like legal theories because, of course, ultimately that's what we have to come up with. So let's try to put some of these ideas in a little bit of structure. And the reason that this is worth doing and worth spending the time doing in a slightly more formal way, again, you don't have to have a fancy spreadsheet or anything, is that whatever we research, remember you have to type in those words, whether it's pre-existing condition or Affordable Care Act or any of the others. And also it starts to get you thinking in a more systematic way, so maybe you start to think about other terms or issues or ideas that you may want to investigate. So we've already started a little bit, so let's start with the question, who? We've said a couple, so just repeat. Matt or anybody?
Client, employer,
Lawyer. Okay. Insurance company. Who? Client? So the insurance company is, I mentioned, an HMO. Anybody know what an HMO stands for? Health something? So I know you all didn't say HMO, but since I've mentioned it, and obviously that's something you all could Google, but I'll save you the trouble because there's no point in making you do that. Maintenance organization. Cardiologist. Whatever. Okay. All right. Now the thing about these questions also is you're not necessarily going to use all of these terms, and also you don't have to necessarily answer all of the questions, and if you don't really understand how one applies, don't worry about it. Or if a particular idea might fall in one category or the other, just get it down there. Don't worry so much about whether it goes in which column. So what? So what do we want to happen, or what has happened?
provides insurance plan.
So provides insurance plan is what you said? Okay. So what has happened? Coverage. It's the same thing. So your client applied to her HMO and said, hey, I want to go to the cardiologist. And they said, no, we're not going to cover that. You could go on your own and pay for it, but we're not covering it. So anything else?
Add hard. Just going down the list.
We're on the what list, but if you have something else, like
I thought we were just going, if you're on client, add heart attack, potentially.
Heart attack. So what do we want to happen? What does your client want?
Assuming the insurance company to pay for whatever medical costs they incurred associated with you.
But what does she want you? What does she want you to do?
Figure out if the insurance company, if there's a round to sue the insurance company on.
Sue insurance company. Or how about let's just say sue HMO, because that makes this a little bit easier to read. If you're all okay with that. Any other what anyone can think of? Where are we? Jurisdiction. New York. Client lives and works in New York. Always need to think about jurisdiction. It might not always be limiting, but you always want to think about it. Okay, when?
Born.
Pardon me?
I would say born with, or always, and then you can do 6 months.
Okay, so 6 months. Now your client was born with the defect, but is that going to be important for Okay, so we'll add it. You're right. Always add it. Born with, whoops, defect. Yeah.
Maybe when they were denied the coverage.
So we,
At what point?
okay. Or I should say time of denial. How about that? Okay, and we're worried about the when because of, very good, statute of limitations. So that time of denial, we know she had the heart attack, 6 months. We don't know. Okay. Again, why are we suing her? Why does your client want to sue HMO?
Incurred a boatload of monetary losses associated with healthcare coverage.
Okay. Again, not every column is necessary as long as you start to think about, I guess the main columns I would rarely have reason to leave out is the who column, the where column most of the time, the when for statute of limitations issues, and I would want the legal theories column, which is going to get cut off of our recording, but so any initial thoughts? So we know we want to sue the HMO. We haven't done the research yet, so we might not know the theories yet, but always good to start to think about it.
The HMO breached their contract when they denied.
Okay. Breach of contract might be a possible theory. And actually, one of you mentioned early on, which is why I have this funky blank box here, is more info needed, insurance contract. So if we're suing for breach of contract, we kind of need the contract, and one of you did mention that. That's why I don't like, oh, I know what I did wrong here. Okay, other legal theories? Tort, because of?
They negligently denied it. They should have.
Negligent denial. Any other? Yeah. Pain and suffering. Go under monetary losses. Again, it doesn't really matter what. It's not really a legal theory, but other thoughts?
Just throwing things at the wall. Fraud.
Well,
They intentionally denied it. They had to do it.
oops. Always worth thinking about the possibilities. You don't know, that might be a more of a factual question where you need to do some investigation. Okay. So we've gotten a start. We've thought about some possibilities of theories. So now the next step might be to start our research. And as I've been suggesting, Google is a perfectly fine place to go. It's free. Remember, we're starting to think about cost effectiveness. It's certainly easy. We all know how to use it. But we need to think about, and part of one of maybe the hardest part, I think, of doing research and it's something that I also unfortunately can't teach anybody how to do better or worse. I can give you tips, and that is to identify the key concepts, identify the terms that we're going to type in, because whether we're on Google, Lexis, Westlaw, whether we're picking up a book and looking in the index, we need to choose the words to either type in or look under, right? And that's the hard part, because you have to start to think about, even though you don't know what you're finding yet, you have to start to think about what words are going to be in there. So in looking at our issue spotting, what are some of the words we might search? I mean, obviously you don't throw in all of these words. That would pull up crazy results, right? On either Google or Lexis, Westlaw, or Bloomberg. That happened. So while I'm fighting with trying to get this to so what are some of the terms?
Sure.
Terms to search. Okay, insure, but what is our insurer?
I mean, like I would insure liability for denial of coverage.
Insure liability for denial of coverage. I heard something on this end. Ah, good point. Okay. Right, because we have automobile insurance and homeowners insurance and so HMO. Yeah, Stan.
I would add a comma at the end of the third term if the cardiologist after that, so the third thing that makes people cardiologist.
Okay, so do you think, and again, questions you might want to ask yourself, is cardiologist a key concept? Does it matter what if it was a gastroenterologist or a dentist? Does it matter?
I think it does matter because people think heart, it's more generally more of a pressing need than say if you have something like a more progressive condition like gout or another type of degenerative disease where people take heart conditions pretty seriously.
Or oncologist for cancer, or whatever, even a dentist if, you've got a cavity and you're going to lose your tooth.
I mean, nobody cares about somebody losing a tooth, Sherry wouldn't care unless you're lost.
Well, okay, so losing a tooth is a bad example. What about a dentist if you're going to have some sort of jaw complication? I don't know enough about dentistry to come up with a good example. So the point being, as you think about, you want to be careful about the terms. It's good to be fact specific, and maybe you want to throw cardiologist in there because the closer to your facts, the better off. But maybe you also want to think about, well, that's pretty fact specific. Maybe I want to try it with or without, because obviously there are other experts, like I said, gastroenterologists. There are horrible things that could go wrong with your digestive system that are pretty emergency. Appendicitis could kill somebody if that doesn't get caught quickly. So again, I'll put in, because as I said, good to be fact specific, but you want to be careful not to let that narrow you too much. Because obviously if you found a resource that talked about gastroenterologists denying coverage and all of this, you'd want to know about it, right? Other thoughts? Oh, I'm sorry, Tessa?
I guess if you just specialist generally, like maybe cardiologists wouldn't bring up this.
Okay. Any other thoughts? All right, then I'm going to save this for the moment, and let's go to Google. So we said, actually, let's go back and see what we said.
HMO liability for denial.
HMO for denial of coverage. Thank you. So HMO liability for denial of coverage. Let's see what happened if we throw in cardiologist specialist. To be honest with you, I don't know what's going to happen. Huh, okay. Lots of digital commons stuff. So here we see some of the results. So criminal prosecution for HMO treatment denial. We're not interested in criminal. Medical negligence. So let's see what happens if we take those terms out. And again, the beauty of Google, it's easy, doesn't cost anything, don't have to worry. So here we see HMO liability, health maintenance organizations, and legal issues. That sounds promising. Health plan liability and ERISA. We don't know what ERISA means yet. Anybody know what ERISA means yet?
Employee retirement income savings administration.
Security, but close enough. Okay. Here's the Texas Medical Association. Let's see what else. Okay, so let's take a look at a couple of these. So here we have the law offices of. Now, different people have different thoughts on relying on law firm websites. What I will tell you is there's nothing wrong at taking a look and learning what you can, but I certainly wouldn't cite to them. I wouldn't rely on them. Law firm websites exist to create business. And of course, that's what law firms do. They're in business, and so there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. And they do that by saying, hey, here, we are an expert in this. So perhaps if your client hadn't found you, she might have gone on the web and found these folks if they're New York lawyers, which I haven't looked yet. Yeah. Okay, they are. So maybe that would have been a great thing for this law firm because they would have gotten a client. But you, as another attorney, need to confirm whatever they say here on your own, because maybe these are totally amazing, or I should say he, Neil Carla, is a totally amazing, fantastic lawyer, or maybe he's not, or maybe he put this information up 15 years ago. I haven't looked for a date yet. The point being, definitely use what you find and learn from it, but don't rely on it if it is for other than research purposes. So this is to generate business purposes. So what do we have here? Term health maintenance organization. So it gives us a background. Now it talks a little bit about HMO negligence. That's one of our theories. And gives us other links. So one thing it's good for is helping us learn some of the terminology. So it looks like we have most of it. Oh, there's something here. Treatment is medically necessary. We might want to keep that in, write that down. Okay, so that's a law firm website. So the second link, so this is telling us, what's this ERISA thing? Does this have anything to do with us? Do we care about it? We presumably don't know a whole lot about this whole HMO liability thing, but also we see another term, health plan, might be relevant to use. Expanding scope of state legislation. So we learn here, first line, so in case you weren't sure, it's the Employee Retirement Income Security Act of 1974. And it says here, it supersedes state laws as they relate to employer-based health care plans. Thus, cases brought under ERISA are heard in federal courts. We still don't know. We don't know much, if anything, about ERISA yet, But we now have another question that we need to worry about, and that is, does ERISA apply to us? Sounds like it might. And if it does, do we have to worry about whether or not ERISA supersedes state law? So we need to be worrying about ERISA, which is the federal law. And then we can again get some background and get some terminology here. And I should also mention, we were looking at the website and I commented to you with making an assumption that I shouldn't have. Look, it was a law firm website. One thing you need to be supremely careful about when Googling is thinking critically about sources. You know, you came up with a page, again, it had all of our terms, it talked about health law and HMOs and great, but it was a law firm. So I should have asked you first, 40 lashes for me, how good a site this was. So I suggested to you law firm, good to look at, not so good to rely on. So this site, how good a site is this? I won't make the same mistake twice. Anybody know what this site is? Kind of hard to see.
Database
A database, or I'm sorry?
of the Library of Medicine, the National Institute of Health.
Oh, so you can see it, at least if you're close enough, up front, National Institute of Health. So does that seem more reliable, less reliable than a law firm site? Yes, which?
More reliable, especially because this was a journal article.
Okay, so it's citing from an oldish journal article, okay? Okay. So one of those, so if we think this is a good site, but it's an oldish journal article, I had mentioned to you Advanced Google. We'll use this technique a whole lot of times, and I'm going to mention it a whole lot of times because I think it's just so useful. So this is the National Institute of Health. If I think, hey, this might be a good site, I want to look into it more, but this is an old article, as Stan very wisely noted. He's being bibliographically aware. Good for you on first class. So my advanced Google tip for you is to do what's called a site search. I can tell Google, hey Google, I want you to search just this one site because I think this site could have really useful stuff. I don't want to search the whole web because then I get all sorts of other crazy stuff. So before the web address, I type the word site, S-I-T-E, colon, no spaces. And then what I'm going to do is at the end, I'm going to back up to the basic part. So before there are any slashes, so the basic part of the website. And again, I'm going to show you this a few times in a few different ways. And then let's try what terms. We only want to do a couple of terms. What terms should we plug in? What do we want to tell Google to search? What terms? Presumably HMO. What else? Liability. Okay, let's keep it simple. So now you can see this www.ncbi.nlm.nih.gov. All of our results are that same site because we told Google just search that site. Anybody do a site search before? This is supremely useful. This is supremely useful not just for legal research, but anytime I'm trying to do a search in a site that doesn't have its own search capability or search box, whether I'm, I don't know, trying to find more information on when the polar bear plunges, or shopping sites, or any, personal stuff, professional stuff. This is really useful, again, for when you want to do a search in a particular site and it doesn't have its own search mechanism. So there we go. I kept one promise of showing you advanced Google. And again, we'll go over this a lot. So we thought that this NCBI site, so let's take a look and see, at least this first link. It looks like a pretty good search, actually. So another old-ish article, so we're now in the PubMed world. So it may or may not have been that useful. So we looked at the law firm, and I suggested to you maybe law firms are good for educating us, but not so good to rely on because they're more interested in generating business. Maybe this National Institute of Health, because it's a large organization, is more reliable. The information we're getting isn't so great because they're old articles, but from whether we can rely on this. So what I would like to do is to step back and think about reliability of websites. We're all going to Google, and we're all going to find stuff, and you have me standing up here pontificating, law firm sites are okay but not great, and this site's so much better. Obviously, you're not going to have me pontificating over your shoulder when you're doing research. So let's think about, talk about ways for you to think about reliability of websites, and to emphasize that I'm not the only one pontificating and suggesting that's important. I'm going to refer, as I promised, to Mr. Colbert back in the days of the Colbert Report, which I have to say, just as an unimportant aside, I really miss him in the old days. He's good. He's okay now, but I thought he was a lot more fun then. Had you all seen some of the old stuff? Okay, good. Okay, so this is only a few minutes. Oh, wait. For some reason, my sound is... That's why. Turned it up before. Okay. So if you have a place where you can upload your web page, and someone like Sean, who's very capable in programming, even I know a teeny little bit of HTML, I can put up a web page that says just about anything. And if I'm good at Google search optimization, I can get my results toward the top, and you all would find it doing your Google search. So hopefully Mr. Colbert and my humble efforts have convinced you that you need to be really careful what you rely on out there on the web. So what I would like to do now is our first workshop in thinking about how to determine whether you can rely on whatever you find on Google, or, well, really on Google or whatever search engine you're using. And the way we're going to do that is on the Twen page, under our workshops link, the very first option, evaluating information on the web, which will look like that. So what I'm going to ask you to do, and don't start quite yet, please, what I'm going to ask you to do, and spend just 10 minutes, not long, is there are two different sites linked here. You should be able to click on them and it should open a new tab. Take a look at each site, and then below each site there are just a couple of questions. They're actually the same for each site. Would you rely on the site? Explain why you chose the answer. And so that's for site number 1, site number 2, and then there's a third question asking you which you think is more reliable. And when you're looking at the sites, I'm asking you to evaluate the trustworthiness. These sites have to do with bullying. So if you were doing research on bullying and you came across these two sites, how would you evaluate the trustworthiness of each site as a source of information about bullying? And I'm particularly interested, as it says here on your take, you can stay on that page, you can go out to open other tabs, go out to other websites, anything that you would normally do. Again, this whole exercise is going to take about 10 minutes. This, I want to mention to you before you get started, is based on a really fascinating article that I read about how people evaluate the web, and we'll talk more about the article after you've done this exercise, which is actually what the subjects for this article is about, a research project, and the subjects for this research project actually did this exercise. So you're doing the same exercise that folks did for this particular article. So why don't you get started? And I'll give you a heads up a couple minutes before we're ready to wrap up. And if you look like you're done earlier, we can go from there. Another source may have updated: American College, National Organization, other healthcare professionals. Somebody's quoting, presumably from somewhere in the website. .org implies it's more reliable and is authored by a doctor. Website ends in .org. Might be outdated, seems opinionated. Let's see. Sources for their facts and provide links to those specified sources with proper citation, Articles, books, statute. Website contains Yahoo News and a footnote that Alon would cause concern. Author of the statement, Den Trumbull, is controversial doctor from Alabama. Whoever found that, how did you find that? You Googled it. Okay. I considered the footnotes. Author did not write solely on what he or she believed to be true. She cited sources, certain claims. Clear statements are opinions. Written by a doctor. Sources well cited. Date was written. My only concern, the age of the article. Okay. Bibliographic awareness. I'm all for it. Rely on the information. Author seems credible and legitimate. Link page, look acceptable study. I would not rely directly on the information. I'd rather use sources cited at the bottom to double check. Small advocacy organization formed against the American Academy of Pediatrics that clearly has a strong viewpoint in one direction. Therefore, I'd want to double check my facts. So, how did whoever wrote this find out that there's a small advocacy organization? You. Okay. So you Googled the organization also? Okay. Okay. So let's go on to the Academy. So, wow. 50, well, actually not too far, a little bit less, fewer percentage of you would rely on this, and a little higher percentage would not rely on it. And let's see. Organization, 66,000 pediatricians committed to, again, I'm guessing somebody did use the About Us link, is that right, for the 66,000? Or Google?
It was
on the page. Okay. Not as descriptive as the previous website. Does not seemingly offer as much information. It's only discussing what is going to be addressed in an upcoming symposium. There was no citations. More news-oriented about the symposium. Healthcare providers lead organization in advancement. Press release, too old. There aren't secondary sources to back up the information aside from quotes taken from doctors, even though they published the article. Organization has been around for 70 years, okay, so another person looked at the way the site looked, the other information available on the page. Okay, and so 47% of you liked the college. 29% of you, preferred the Academy, and 23% wasn't quite sure. Okay, so let's take a look at this article in which I found this exercise, because as I said, these researchers, which are two people from the Stanford History Education Group. By the way, I highly recommend taking a look at this article. It's linked in the additional readings on TWEN. It's not required, but I thought it was supremely fascinating. You don't even have to, I skimmed through the statistical part because frankly I don't have much background in hardcore statistics, so I didn't understand it anyway. But the substance of it in terms of how people evaluate websites and what they suggested as better techniques. I learned a ton from it. So I highly recommend it, and that's why we're doing this exercise. So these are two researchers from the Stanford History Education Group. So bookmarked. So according to the authors of the article, the participants evaluate articles about bullying from the academy. They're doing the same thing we did in the college. Describe similarity of the names. The two organizations couldn't be more different. The academy, as a couple of you found, established in 1932, largest professional organization of pediatricians in the world, with someone found, actually I guess this article's a little old, 64,000. The college is a splinter group. Alex, I think that was you who found it. Did anybody else find that? I think there were a couple of comments, Dan, that broke off from the parent organization. Over the issue of adoption by same-sex couples, estimated to be about 500 members. The group has come under withering criticism for its virulently anti-gay stance, its advocacy of reparative therapy, forgive my pronunciation here. So as a couple of you found, they had some very definite strong viewpoints in a particular controversial area. Okay, so those are the two sites. So looking at now, how did the people they had look at them evaluate these sites? Well, in considering how people evaluate websites, they did, as all others do, look at the prior literature, and they found that they looked at three groups, basically. They looked at college students, they looked at a group of historians, and they looked at a group of fact-checkers, people who work for fact-checking organizations. And in doing their research in terms of what other researchers had found, this Wiley article had found that college students rarely considered where information came from when evaluating reliability. Young people are more likely to judge a website based on its relevance to their searching needs, its appearance, or how easy it is to navigate. And I know from experience of working with folks at the reference desk and working with students in class asking you to evaluate websites, a lot of times something that's easy to find, easy to navigate is a basis for which people evaluate how good the information is. So apparently they found that as well with the college students that they used for this research study. So as we continue, so what did the different groups find? So the fact checkers, 100% of the fact checkers actually found the Academy to be the more reliable site, which, as we've now seen, based on the folks who wrote this article, who took a lot more time to evaluate these sites, is the more reliable source. Historians, not so much. So those of you who didn't find the Academy more reliable than the college, don't feel so badly, because these professional historians, only 50% of them figured that out. 40%, good 40% of them thought, like some of you, that the college site was more reliable. And the students, even more so. Only 20% of them found the Academy site more reliable, and a full 64% of them found the college site, the more opinionated, controversial site, more reliable. So what did the fact checkers do to help them figure out which was the more reliable site? So the fact checkers' comments suggested, I immediately wanted to know more about the college site, so they went to the About Us link. So one thing to take a look at, now granted that's written by the people writing the site, so they're going to put their best foot forward, but it's still going to give you it's going to tell you who they are. Maybe there's a parent group sponsoring that group, we don't know. So this other fact checker said, I might open another tab just to read a little bit more. about this, if this is the main pediatricians group professional organization or if this is a splinter group for some reason. So basically they're saying, as a couple of you did, they actually looked more into this group, both in the About Us, and then investigated the group in a separate tab just by Googling the group and reading a little bit about it elsewhere. So what did the folks who didn't make the judgment quite as well take a look at? So these professional historians, they were often taken by the college's name and its logo. It's .org domain. They thought that that made it more reliable. I think we saw a couple of comments to that effect, a couple of your comments. The layout, the aesthetics, similar to what the college students said. If it's laid out nice and it looks nice, it seems more reliable. Its scientific appearance, complete with abstract references and articles authored by medical doctors. So again, they saw these other articles, these other secondary sources, as some of you mentioned, they saw that as a sign of reliability, which misled them. So continuing on. So one feature that played a role in the historian's judgments was, again, the presence of references. A couple of you mentioned you saw references to other articles, and you thought that conveyed reliability. I guess the moral of this story is anybody can cite to existing research, right? Anybody can find research that they think justifies whatever their opinion is, so that may not be contrary to what sounds like a very logical supposition that, hey, they're citing to real research. This must be good. Well, people can find stuff to cite to, or maybe they're citing to it to make themselves look good. So that turns out not to be such a reliable indication, or such a great indication of reliability. So it seems like those references, these are professional historians. That's what they look to. So citing real journals is another justification. So that's what we just saw. And what did the students who had the most difficulty? Students saw an abstract. They liked how it was laid out. Pretty much what we saw that other earlier study said about how students judge reliability. Bullet points, so pretty much appearance. So some of the keys to help you not fall into these very easy traps or very logical reasons, seemingly logical reasons that turn out not to be turn out not to be great reasons to rely on a site. They also spell out in this article, which is another reason why I recommend it. And what I'm jumping to now, they did actually, with their research subjects, several different exercises. We're only going to do one because we only have so much time. And in this second exercise, which is, again, also very interesting if you want to read it later, the fact checkers, basically were looking at this minimum wage, or the research subjects, including the fact checkers, were looking at this minimumwage.com, and in order to judge its reliability, as suggested with the one that we looked at, they looked at the About Us, and they learned that in About Us, it was this minimumwage.com was actually sponsored by a larger organization, this Employment Policies Institute, which was a product of this company whose basically job is to create websites, to create official sounding nonprofit groups to disseminate information on behalf of their corporate clients. So they're a PR operation, and they put out these nonprofit organization websites to basically promote their corporations. So they they probably are promoting something as opposed to being a reliable source of information. So what they suggest, what the fact checkers suggest, and what the authors of this article suggest, is a process. I realize it's kind of small. Let me see if I can make that a little bit bigger for you. try to center it so you can actually see the whole thing. That's not working. There we go. That's working. Now I have to make it a little smaller. There we go. That's about as big as I'm going to get it. So in looking at this other web page, but the same thing applies for ours, and looking at the web page, look at the About Us. See what they have to say about themselves. See if they're sponsored by somebody else. And the sites you all looked at, they weren't. The splinter group, the college, was its own group, but they split off from the larger group. If they are sponsored by some other organization, check out that organization's homepage and the About Us. So that's steps 2 and 3 here. Then Google the responsible organization. A couple of you did that. That's what the fact checkers did. So Google the American College of Pediatrics as well as the American Academy of Pediatricians. And then when you look in your Google results, see what you find and look at those results. You might not want to look at the very first result. I'm sure you've done plenty of Google searches where the first result wasn't the best one. Maybe the third or fourth or fifth one was, right? So take a look and look at the underlying information and see which one seems to you to be more reliable. So what the researchers did, or the fact checkers did for this particular example, is they found a site in which a New York Times reporter, a particular site was quoting a New York Times reporter, and they thought, okay, the New York Times is at least reputable. You may have your opinions about it, but it is a reputable publication. And within that article that quoted the New York Times reporter, they found a reference to an NPR article, and they were able to learn exactly what this organization was about and why they had the web page there. In fact, that they were really just promoting corporate interest as opposed to trying to present information in an unbiased way. So some fairly easy steps to keep in mind about us. Googling the organization. What this article talks about, and again, we don't have much time to go into too much detail, is this concept of lateral reading, reading less and learning more. So the idea of reading less of the entire content of a page and going laterally across to investigate other parts of the website, like the About Us, or laterally even further to going outside that website, going to a different website, Googling, and learning more about them from the outside. So those are steps to help you as you do your research and as you Google and find sites that may or may not sound great, to think about how you might determine whether or not to rely on information. And again, in this day and age where fake news is talked about pretty much nonstop from all sides of all political spectrums, as well as not just political, but any area where there's disagreement. Some good points to keep in mind as you investigate whether you're reading something off your Facebook feed or Googling for research for a client. Any questions? So I have a question for you, and please be honest. This is the first time I've used this because this is a very new article, as you can see. Was this useful? For those of you who might not have found it useful, why? And again, this is a sincere question to help me address your questions as well as make things better as we go along. Okay. If you're uncomfortable or sharing, and you're more comfortable emailing me, that would be great. If you have any other thoughts about what would make this more useful, I'd love to hear it. So the last thing I want to talk about this evening, at least last thing of substance, and I referred to it way back in the beginning of class a couple hours ago, are costs. We talked about being efficient. Of course, effective is the most important, but we also want to be efficient. We want to be time efficient and not spend too much time. But as I mentioned, Lexis and Westlaw can get very expensive. So the way Lexis, Westlaw, and Bloomberg, well, the way Lexis and Westlaw work is that firms and as well as libraries subscribe, just like, you know, you subscribe to Amazon Prime. You subscribe to Amazon Prime and you pay your, was it $99 a year these days? Mine's coming up soon. And then you get to use Prime as much as you want. There's no additional fees. So that's kind of like what Bloomberg does. You subscribe to Bloomberg and you can pay Bloomberg as much as you want. Fastcase also. We'll talk about Fastcase in a little more detail next week. Lexis and Westlaw work differently. Here in the law school, we, the library, pay large amounts of dollars, like 5-figure amounts of dollars for each service. And that allows you all to search just like Amazon Prime. You can use it 24/7 if you're crazy enough to do that, as much as you want, and we just pay that one 5-figure amount. Not the case for all firms, organizations, government, courts. What tends to happen is they buy a slice of Lexis or Westlaw or both, and within that slice, that is their subscription, and they can, the terminology is eat as much as you want. Like, you know, you go to one of those all-you-can-eat buffets. So within your slice, you can search as much as you want. You can do the 24/7. But if you go outside of your slice, which are typically particular resources, so medium-sized firms, small firms, they may just buy their state's slice. So they might buy their state's primary sources. And we'll talk about secondary and primary next week. But they'll buy their state's statutes and cases and regulations. Maybe they'll get some secondary sources, so some treatises or whatnot. But if they want to do, if they're in New York and they have a client who's in Connecticut, they're going to have to pay every time they view a document outside of New York stuff. Maybe they'll get their slices New York and New York federal stuff. Maybe they'll get New York and Connecticut if it turns out they have a lot of Connecticut clients. And obviously the larger they go, the more their subscription price is. And this is true for both Lexis and Westlaw. So whatever you search within your plan, within your subscription, you don't pay extra. Whatever you search outside costs extra. So if you do search outside, how does that pricing work? So they have, Westlaw has 2 different ways that they can charge an organization. And that is called hourly and transactional. So this page, by the way, if you're interested, if you go to Westlaw, there is a funky section that you may or may not have used before called Tools. We'll go back there a few times, not many. And within Tools, you'll see the subscriber pricing guide. And that's what we're looking at here. So an organization can choose to be charged hourly, so obviously by the minute or by the hour, really by the minute, or they can choose to be charged transactionally. And transactionally is pretty much per search. Now, what both Lexis and Westlaw have done is they fine-tune this to an extent that I don't think any 2 organizations are like, and it's also really complicated. So whether or not you get charged for a particular search depends upon your plan. So, and now the way they do it is you use, again, depending on whether you get charged for a search, depends on your plan, but their sort of generic way of describing it is you don't get charged for search, you get charged for documents viewed. And you get charged only for the documents viewed outside of your plan. So if you're a New York plan, so you have New York stuff, and maybe New York federal, so like New York federal courts, you get charged for Connecticut or Wyoming or anywhere else. And then it depends on the document. And it depends again on whether you choose the hourly or the transactional. And then there can also be a delivery charge, again, for hourly billing for the documents delivered. So delivered means emailed or printed or downloaded. And so you can see for cases outside the plan, for document viewed, it's $23.50, give or take, per case. As you go down to other types of secondary content, and again, we'll get into the details of primary versus secondary, I'm sure you remember most of it, starts to get more expensive. Law reviews, $55 per document viewed. So if you go and you click and you look at a law review and you say, oh no, that stinks, I don't want to look at that, you've just have to pay $55. Excuse me. As you go down to other types of documents, the price goes up. So litigation content, $83. And then we start getting into premier stuff, $150 per document viewed. So if you view a section of some treatise of one of these motion reports, it's $150. If you view the next section of the same report, it's another $150. So hopefully you get a sense this can add up very quickly depending upon what you're looking at. If you're looking at within your plan, then you don't have to worry about it as much. If you're looking at outside of your plan, you do. And as you scroll down, you get a better sense. Look, there's some stuff that's just what did I just see? $395. I don't know. We don't actually have access to that, some of this company stuff here in the law school, so I don't know much about it. Okay, works pretty much the same for Lexis. They divided up, I think, a little easier to understand. So primary law, document access charge, and they don't charge for delivery. So again, so if you're looking at a statutory code outside of your state, so again, if you're looking at Connecticut, one single section of a statutory code would cost $19. And this next section would cost another $19. And you can see treatises start to get more expensive. And depending on what tier they put you in. Shepard's for the moment doesn't cost anything, nor does Keysight. I often wonder how long that'll last, but so far that's held for a few years now. So what I hope you get out of this is not memorizing that Shepard's doesn't cost and litigation tier 2 costs $150 or whatever it is. That's not the point. The point is that you need to be aware, not so much now because it doesn't cost you anything more for sure. It doesn't even cost the library or law school anything more. We've got a flat rate. Some of the huge firms in New York actually will do the same thing. So they'll basically just have everything in their plan. But what you want to get out of this is you need to be aware of the costs. And what we will talk about as we go across the semester as some cost-saving tips as you are using Lexis and Westlaw. For instance, if you do a very broad search, you'll get charged for whatever you get charged for the search. But then once you're within the search, if you do a search within, you don't get charged again. If you did two separate searches, so if we did HMO, liability, cardiologist, we get charged for search. Then if we did HMO liability, we get charged for a second search. If we did HMO liability and then did search within cardiologist, we'd only get charged for one search. Using folders is another way. If you actually view a document that you paid for, you're going to pay for it. But if you put it in a folder, then you have it available to you for a year. So you only pay for it once instead of when you need it next week, paying for it again. You'll see, for those of you who choose to do the extra credit, you'll see some of these tips in the video for Westlaw and the PowerPoint for Lexis. Any questions about cost pricing or anything else for that matter? There are a couple of handouts. I have to remember where I put them. So you'll see a couple of links here in class web links. Most of the websites that we go to, just as an FYI, separate for cost issues, I will also put here on the Twin site. So I'll try to make available to you whatever we discuss in terms of handouts or websites somewhere here on the website. So speaking of the extra credit, again, if you are interested, it's not required. You'll find it here in the link with the instructions as well as the links to the video and the PowerPoint. Just a reminder on screencasts, please view the first two, part 1 and part 2, and answer the questions. Again, you want to register for TED Ed. That should take you about a minute to register. Again, the questions are hopefully pretty straightforward as well, and not too many. If you have any difficulties with TED Ed, let me know, or questions. Any other questions, thoughts? And as you will see, I'm